Design is by definition anticipatory. It anticipates and produces futures. It is always already projective. If indeed the future is already here, just unevenly distributed, maybe we need merely to scan the trajectories of the present in order to see the future. Situated against a backdrop of accelerating ecological, technological, and cultural transformations, we have found it imperative to engage architecture as an expanded spatial and material practice, a practice grounded in the discipline of architecture, but not limited by its boundaries. The scope of an expanded practice is necessarily both broad and specific. Its research agendas take into account a wide range of sources, causes, and effects, looking at phenomena forensically at multiple scales and across disciplinary lines. Between the technophilic and the technophobic exists a critical terrain created by the intersection of technology, the body, and the built environment. Increasingly accessible and customizable devices, including microcontrollers, sensors, RFID tags, are enabling a tighter integration between architecture and electronics. The defensible dress is a portable, customizable, and personal architecture, delineating the territory of personal space through the use of thermally responsive shape memory alloys. Increasingly, problem-based research agendas demand different modes of practice that utilize interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and transdisciplinary research terms and teams. Within popular culture, access to how-to information has led to the emergence of a do-it-yourself culture. While the amateur home builder, tinkerer, inventor may appear to signal a kind of post-professionalism, we see DIY culture as a rich site of speculation, where cultural production is hacked, sampled, and repurposed for unanticipated and unsanctioned applications. As one transgresses disciplinary boundaries, new forms of representation are created or repurposed to communicate design intention. For us, DIY has become an extreme kind of design build, which requires designers' sweat equity to balance out the economies of scale. Computation has transformed both design and fabrication, enabling unprecedented degrees of complexity and intricacy. Simplexity describes the emergence of simplicity out of intricate and complex sets of rules, and vice versa. Strategically deployed, rule sets can produce both a high level of control and a high level of openness. Computation is, of course, not limited to the algorithm. Materials also have the capacity to compute. Here, the ductile polypropylene deflects to create an inhabitable prototype. With plugins and scripts, we can increasingly customize software, tailoring our tools to our own specific needs. These modified design tools enable us to study multiple options, but also force us to clearly define the rules of the system. Here, a series of definitions were created to produce a locally responsive and continuous micro and macro spatial sequence. The project's final form is a result of this elastically responsive logic. Software and hardware are necessarily intertwined. Advances in smart materials and embedded electronics have rendered the promise of an architecture that is smarter, more responsive, and more responsible than ever before. Electronic devices have been used to augment our built environment for decades. These technologies have brought surveillance, automation, and control into our spaces. At the same time, they've brought new opportunities for public engagement, responsiveness, and interaction. Using a microcontroller, flexible photovoltaic cells, and a rechargeable battery, Hover creates an off-grid canopy that harvests solar energy during the day and transforms it into a luminous temporary public space. Analogous to the firmware that is found in a memory chip, wetware is the data and the protocols found in a biological system. Wetware is the underlying program of living organisms. Vent Offset speculates on a moment when software, hardware, and wetware will come together to create a piezoelectric-powered exhaust filter with the intelligence of lungs and the efficiency of machines. The condition of network culture has affected every aspect of politics, economics, and culture. It has reordered historical hierarchies of center and periphery, high and low, expertise and opinion. The ubiquity of computing has created an open source culture where information is increasingly accessible and technology is naturalized. Multiple author projects distribute the problem solving and production, pooling knowledge and relying on the breadth of a quantity of sources. Bottom-up, participatory design, citizen science are the new modes of collective production. These modes of production recognize the limitations of singular authorship and the untapped resources of the collective. And open work relies on the interaction of the public to complete it. The body and the relationship between bodies are repositioned through these sensorial environments. It is through the actions of the public and these projects that these projects transform from merely responsive to adaptive. The proliferation and influence of new horizontal and non-hierarchical structures necessitates an examination of accepted organizational systems within architecture. Re-examining the domestic type, we utilize frameworks, rules, and parameters as a starting point of design. Housing 3 generations under one roof, the triple house is a post-nuclear family house that re-examines the issues of public and private within the suburban context. The home becomes a series of flows, valves, and ports, allowing the extended family to inhabit a single-family house. Telecommunication networks have collapsed geographical distance, creating new adjacencies, alignments, and symmetries. While architects are increasingly working in a global context, what is true for politics is true for construction. It is still local. Culturally specific architectures of type and tradition constitute a kind of cultural encoding. Working within the constraints of type can lead to formal invention through interpretation and transformation, as in this contemporary version of a Chinese courtyard house for a developer in Chengdu, China. Research institutions have signaled the desire for environments that foster exchange and collaboration. This represents a departure from the model of the scientists working in isolation to the model of teams of researchers working across disciplines in search of the breakthrough. The design of the lab of the future incorporates interactive design by scripting encounters through architecture's hardware, circulation and organization, and software, the program, use, and events. The role of ornament in architecture has experienced an uncanny return. Cast out by modernism as unessential, decorative, or decadent, the return of the ornament has been aided by its reinvention as a performative system. Ornament today is said to play a function as an integrated producer of effects and atmospheres. A screen of microturbines for the Kennedy Center recasts the ornamental screen as a performative screen, performing the production and consumption of energy through illumination, creating a visual index. If production was the privileged term of modernism, contemporary modes include both pre-production and post-production. Architects will become increasingly involved with the procurement of materials and of material streams as innovative practices seek out alternative sources. Conversely, every cultural artifact will be understood to be always already mediated, remastered, and remixed. Media has created increasingly intertwined sets of relationships between producers, content creators, consumers, content receivers, and their interfaces within the structure of communication. This is a design proposal for the White House, which acknowledges the role of architecture as a framework for edit-ready post-production sets. The mid-90s fascination with the digital and the virtual have not delivered the promise of a post-corporeal world. The material and the tactile have returned as sites of innovation and speculation, this time without the insistence on the essential material qualities or sanctioned uses. Intersecting the material and optical properties of glass with the controlled physics of light, a contour of effects is revealed despite the flatness of the stacked glass. Architecture's one-time ambition to timelessness, monumentality, and permanence has today been replaced by a new appreciation of duration, temporality, and entropy. Rather than resist evolution and transformation, design that incorporates the temporal are able to be more strategic, nimble, and adaptive. A shift in the emphasis from what architecture looks like, form, and what architecture means, signification, to what architecture does or how it performs culturally, materially, and environmentally, reflects a realignment of the influences of ecology and technology in architecture. Entasis is a material-driven formal device, a spatial valve that creates an active and evolving threshold. The flexibility of the material and the structure's computer-controlled rotations produce a syntax of responsive behaviors. The current obsession with sustainable or green design has tended to privilege the notion of a nature that is pure and untainted, whereas more comprehensive understandings of ecologies would suggest that the green is really brown, and natural processes incorporate a diversity of conditions that cannot be limited to only the verdant and the pure. Only by depolarizing the status of the natural and the artificial, the green and the brown, can we come to understand these processes in a more complete way. The legacy of human action on the environment has ensured that all sites are always, in some way, marked by human presence. The new natural is understood as always already contaminated. The natural is contingent on its relationship to the artificial. The environmental movement's triad of reduce, reuse, recycle excludes the possibility that design, with its anticipatory capacity, could incorporate notions of future deployments into the production of artifacts that incorporate their second and third and even fourth lives, eliminating waste. Taking advantage of the stalled construction site in Boston's downtown crossing, EcoPod is a temporary vertical algae bioreactor and a new public commons. An on-site robotic armature is designed to reconfigure the modules to maximize algae growth conditions and to accommodate evolving spatial and programmatic conditions in real time. The modularity of the units anticipates future deployments on other sites. An instant architecture designed with an intention towards its afterlives. It is a pre-cycled architecture. New modes of action, forms of production, and types of agency have been radicalized by the emerging currency of access. Reorganizing the way we see the world and the way we operate within it, the paradigm shift has affected a generation of cultural producers, creating new ecologies of practice and new modes of architectural production. Thank you.